Hello, everyone. Welcome to the season 2 premiere of Racial and Social Justice Beyond the Dome. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Dan Yu, and here with Lily Crawford, who joins from the board of the Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh. And tonight, we welcome Don Wycliff, class of 79, and Judge David Krashna, class of 71. Thank you both for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us. And Dan, that would be 69 for Don.
Did I say 71 for you?
Yes, but 79 for Don.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think Don would take that, though. So anyway, a very brief background on our guests. Don had a long career in journalism and editorial at the New York Times and taught journalism at the Loyola University in Chicago. And David is a retired judge in California, but still serves as an assigned judge. So, gentlemen, let's go back to the beginning. And I would love to hear from both of you where you grew up.
If you don't mind, Don, can I start off?
Of course.
Thank you. First of all, Dan, Lily, and the club, Pittsburgh Club, Don and I thank you for inviting us to participate. And I'm sure Don feels honored as well. We would also like, this is our last scheduled book event, Lily and Dan, so this means a lot to us in several ways. And we would like to thank at this time two very important members of our Black Domers team. And they are Pam Wycliff, who did all the administrative work on this big project that we undertook. And also Gina Krashna, my wife, who did the photos. In fact, she designed the first cover of our first edition. And that is the second edition. Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing that. And with that said, I was born in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, Washington County, in your state of Pennsylvania. I was raised in a Catholic orphanage called the former St. Paul's Orphanage, which is now St. Paul's Seminary in the East Carnegie part of Pittsburgh, PA. So that's my background before I went to our beloved university, the University of Notre Dame.
Thank you. I was born in East Texas, a little town called Dayton, Texas. My family moved away when I was 7. We were part of the Great Black Migration out of the South into the North and the West, looking for safety and opportunity. While everybody else was going to glamorous places like New York and Chicago, we went to a place called Ashland, Kentucky, where my dad went to work for the federal prison system, and where my brothers and sisters and I became the first, and for a long time, the only Black kids in an all-white Catholic school, mainly Irish, Italian, other ethnicities. And I graduated from a Catholic high school ultimately in Terre Haute, Indiana, and went from there to Notre Dame.
And so how both of you came to Notre Dame was wildly different, right? So, and David, it was kind of a fait accompli that you were going to go to ND. And for you, Don, it just kind of happened. So, so Don, tell us how that happened for you.
Yeah, it was a surprise, actually. I reached senior year of high school, actually second semester of senior year of high school. I had no idea what I was going to do, was casting about, considering the Marine Corps and other alternatives. And fortunately, there were people looking out for me, one of whom was my school principal, who was, I'm sure he was doing this for a lot of kids, casting about for scholarships and other opportunities. And he encouraged me to go for an interview for a scholarship that the Archdiocese of Indianapolis was giving away that year for a Black student, graduate of one of their high schools. And for technical reasons, I wasn't eligible for that. But one of the interviewers was a Notre Dame graduate, a gentleman named Mr. Patrick Fisher. And shortly after the interview, he called and talked to my parents and asked whether I'd be interested in going to Notre Dame. And in the space of about a month, I was admitted to the university with a scholarship, and the rest is history.
Great. And David?
Well, thank you, Dan and Don. Can I just add to yours that to this day, if I'm not mistaken, you don't know who the generous anonymous donor of your scholarship was. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
That's an
I have my
amazing story.
suspicions, but
Yeah,
but I don't know.
right. Well, I'm a Western Pennsylvania guy, Dan and Louie, and I went 1 year to Central Catholic High School and graduated from Bishop Canevin High School. But I started out at St. Paul's Orphan Asylum, now euphemistically then called St. Paul's Orphanage. And just like you said, I was meant for Notre Dame, Dan. My kindergarten teacher was Sister Mary Bridget Moriarty, for example, and the superintendent of the orphanage was Father John C. McCarran. And so these people constantly bombarded me, indoctrinated me very fittingly, and I also soaked it in about the University of Notre Dame. We had a little football team in grade school, and our head coach was Bernie Powers, who apparently played some quarterback at the University of Notre Dame. So Dan, I was told by my social worker at this time, not my original social worker, but George Wagner, who's still with us and lives in Pasadena, California. He said, David, don't put all your proverbial eggs in a basket. What if Notre Dame doesn't accept you? And I'm thinking, Notre Dame's going to accept me, but I'll go through this.
What does he know, right?
And I applied to these schools, was accepted in Notre Dame, and that's what brings us here today.
And so both of you were there just a couple years apart, and so the first usual question then when you meet somebody from Notre Dame, what dorm were you in, right? And so you were both in Farley. So
Right.
were you friends at Notre Dame? Like, now I'm sure you are, but were you friends back then?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. David was a couple of years behind me, and I don't remember how we met. All I know is, we became friends. Yeah, that's all I recall. Maybe David has a better memory.
You have to realize this man is very modest, Dan. He was my mentor. There are very few Black students in Farley Hall, and we were males. Now we can't go into Farley Hall, I hear. It's all female dorm. Anyway, there were a couple other Black students in Farley Hall, but they tended to stay by themselves. So I was searching out and I saw this tall gentleman come in and out from the North Dining Hall occasionally, Don Wycliff. And I started to get to know him. And I was struggling a little bit academically with the transition from high school to college. And I remember I was in English literature at that time, and I needed help with Shakespeare. And I found this brilliant mentor a couple years ahead of me on the third or fourth floor. I was on the second floor. And Dan, I would bug him constantly, asking questions about Shakespeare. In fact, I still have the Shakespeare book that he either lent me and I didn't return to him, or he gifted to me. I forget which it is, but we have been friends ever since.
Gotcha. So now, from the book, the story about both of you had one parallel that I found very interesting. You're both active in recruiting Black scholars to Notre Dame, and you both still do that to this day. So how did you get involved with recruiting between the two of you?
Well, I got involved, I guess it was when I was probably my freshman year. As David mentioned, there were very few Black students at Notre Dame in those days. I think in my class, there were maybe a dozen of us, and maybe that many more in all the other classes put together. One of those was a fellow named Jay Cooper, who was, I think at the time, a senior. And he's of a Notre Dame family, Black Notre Dame family. They come from Mobile, Alabama. And Jay was at least to my mind anyway, a big wheel on campus. Worked in student government, and I kind of looked up to him, and he had created something called the Committee on Negro Enrollment, and I got involved almost immediately, I suppose. One of the essayists in the book, Frank Taylor, former Brigadier General Frank Taylor, says in his senior year of high school, he was a year behind me. In his senior year of high school, I came to his high school in Washington and gave a talk about possibly going to Notre Dame, and that influenced him. And I, for the life of me, can't remember that trip or that conversation, but I'll take the credit. And, so I must have been involved very early on. But
Don
that's it.
started before me, obviously, Dan. And by my late sophomore year or junior year, I was very annoyed and depressed about the hypocrisy of Black students on campus. I went directly to Father Hesburgh and asked him, what can be done here, Father Hesburgh? And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, look, you're the chair of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, or you're at least on the commission at that point. What's going on here at your university? So what he did, he took up the challenge, and he sent me and a few others throughout the country to recruit African-American students. And I put together a group called RAP, R-A-P, Recruitment Action Program. And one evening I reported to Father Hesburgh that we had generated 119 admitted Black students. And he was a bit surprised and stunned, might be the word. And we talked that evening as to how these students would be able to come to Notre Dame financially. And as a result of that meeting, Father Hesburgh took a recommendation to the Board of Trustees recommending the elimination of the ban against postseason football game participation. We would not go to post-game football participation because Father Hesburgh and the university wanted to preserve that quiet time for final examinations for the semester. But he knew he had to find a funding source, and that's how he was able to finance those 119 admitted African-American students.
So because of the bowl games, then really that boosted Black enrollment.
Funded the Black enrollment, yes.
Gotcha.
Initially. Mm-hmm.
So during your time at Notre Dame, it's the late 60s. And so did either of you experience racism at Notre Dame?
Don?
No, let me say that. I say yes, I say no, and I say yes at the same time. Obviously, there were incidents. I can remember hearing or having the N word directed at me 3 or 4 times. But in the large scheme of things, Notre Dame was a delight for me, and all of those incidents were far outweighed by other things, other acts by other people that just, they were special. They transported me away. I felt very much at home at Notre Dame, but without question, there were incidents, yeah. But I don't want to give the impression that my Notre Dame years were shadowed and characterized fully by racism. No, that wouldn't be accurate.
David?
I have a similar answer. Let me just augment it by saying I am actually quite surprised to read the Young Black Alumni petition in which they catalog 13 specific grievances that are occurring right now at our university. Now, with that said, I don't recall actually one racial incident directed to me at campus, on campus. But I remember Art McFarland, who was the very effective leader and the first president of the Afro-American Society of Notre Dame. Art and I were on a recruiting trip to Atlanta, Georgia, and we just happened to go to the Notre Dame Georgia Tech game, and we got fairly bad seats way up in the boonies. And we were sitting there, and we were in a sea of white people, and they started yelling epithets, racial epithets at the Black players playing at Notre Dame. And Ricky Waters will appreciate this, who's on board here. We just kind of hit our heads, and hopefully they wouldn't see us. And at that time, I had a big afro. I had hair then. So I'm sure they recognized that I was very much an African-American. But Dan, other than that, no.
Okay. All right. And,
Yeah.
and now, David, you became the first Black student body president at Notre Dame. And so what was that experience like from campaigning to serving?
3 E's, exciting, electric, and exhilarating. The campaigning was wonderful. I can report very proudly and humbly that we had achieved the highest plurality of votes ever in student government history for a student body president and vice president. I had a wonderful vice president, Mark Winings, the late Mark Winings from Elwood, Indiana. Now, I was thinking about that question because you prepped us so well, Dan, for this event, like you always do, by the way. I've seen a number of your presentations. You're wonderful at this. I hope you get paid for this in another realm, by the way. You're so good at this. But anyway, let's see. May 5, 1970. I remember that day very well, okay? Because it was during the uproar about the invasion of Cambodia during the Vietnam War. And campuses throughout the country were exploding, literally exploding, burning down ROTC buildings, etc. And I was called on to give a speech on a big platform on the South Quad, and I was to follow Father Hesburgh, the president of the university. And I listened very attentively to Father Hesburgh's very dynamic speech, and he said a number of things against our government and its role in escalating the war, etc. But he ended it by saying, look, the best thing you could do is continue your education, because you must be educated members of society. I listened to that. I followed him immediately, and I called for a new education, and I called the first and only student strike in the history of the University of Notre Dame. So Dan, when that event, exciting event in front of 1,000 or 2,000 students was over, I knew I was going to get that phone call, okay? And sure enough, when I got to student government, Father Hesburgh, you are to come to my office, okay? So I walked across from La Fortune to his office then in the administration building, and he said very bluntly and very sternly, he was never stern with me, he was always very cordial and collaborative. He said, David, when is this strike going to be over? And I said, Father, I don't know. Well, it continued for 2 weeks. But my May 5, 1970 did not end then, Dan. So I go back to La Fortune, it's now dark, and this very robust, the whole atmosphere, of course, you can imagine, the student government, because you call it a student strike. And I remember a well-known radical student came, and he had a posse behind him of other students. I assume they were students. I didn't recognize them, I don't think, but I recognized him. He said, David, listen, we're going to burn down the ROTC building tonight, and we would like you to lead us. And I was flabbergasted. And when I composed myself, I said, well, listen, not only am I not going to lead you, but you're not going to burn the ROTC building down. So I formed a little posse of my own of other students, and I asked them to follow this group around all night. And the bottom line is no building was burned down. I hear that there was a Molotov cocktail thrown at the ROTC building, but certainly no major damage, and the building stood. So that was my exciting, electric, and exhilarating times at the University of Notre Dame.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. And now, David, after I'm sorry, Don, after you left Notre Dame, you went to grad school. You were going to go for political science. You were going to being active, and then what happened? How did you get into journalism?
I went to grad school in the fall of '69 at the University of Chicago, and was, kind of planning to get a PhD and I assume teach. But to be very frank, I was tired of school, and I was kind of, I don't know, the city of Chicago was difficult for me. But while I was there, you have to remember 1969 was a year of enormous ferment. Indeed, the very first day of classes, September 24th of 1969, was the day the Chicago 8 trial began. And there was lots of other things going on. In any case, I woke up the morning of December 4th, 1969, and turned on the radio in my apartment and learned that Fred Hampton, the leader of the Illinois Black Panther Party, had been slain overnight in a quote unquote shootout with the police. And I had seen Fred Hampton interviewed on TV, had no connection with him, but I was just mightily impressed with the guy and felt a kinship with him. And I was very upset by that. And then I watched as the news media in the city peeled back the layers of the case and found that the truth was far more complex and less flattering to the police than had been initially reported. And I decided, hey, these guys are doing really important stuff, the media. And I said, I want to do that. And so I finished my first year at Chicago and dropped out and went home to Texas and got my first newspaper job, and that was it.
And David, you became a judge, and you worked closely with underprivileged, abused, neglected children. What was that experience like? And you're still doing that kind of work.
Yes, on assignment, and I'm happy to be able to go where I want to go and where needed. When I was a regular judge, Dan, I had to go where my presiding judge told me to go, and if he told me to do a certain assignment like family law, and I didn't want to do it, I had to do it. But I got to do juvenile delinquency and dependency law for 6 or 7 years. It was a great experience. And I was reluctant to take that assignment, Dan, for a couple of reasons. Obviously, someone from an orphanage himself, I was thinking I was going to have so many nightmares about the experiences of the children who appeared in front of me. I didn't have too many nightmares. I really got into it. I dug into the cases, tried to learn the family situation as much as possible. It was my best judicial assignment ever, handling juvenile law.
Incredible. And the fact that you're still doing it, as by assignment.
Yes.
So let's get to the book. So Black Domers. So what was the original inspiration for the book?
Should I start that, Dan? Don?
Of course.
Okay. So ever since I graduated from Notre Dame in 1971, Dan, Louie, and our audience, that includes my friend Bill Joyce, the class of 1972 from Western Pennsylvania, by the way. I forget the small town up which of the three rivers, or it has to be Monongahela or Allegheny. I'm not sure which river. But anyway, after graduation, I kept watching these spectacular and remarkable Black alumni graduate from Notre Dame. And just to go really quickly through a couple that really struck me, Bill Hurd, who was, he's a classmate of yours, is that right, Don?
He is.
And yes, you remember him quite well. He was accomplished as a student. He was a track star, All-American. He played the saxophone. And when he graduated, he's from Memphis, Tennessee, and I believe he's still there. He became an ophthalmologist, and he developed a revolutionary eye device to be able to see behind the eye. And I said, wow, that's radical. That's remarkable. And then we all followed the football prowess, of course, of Alan Page. But then he became an attorney. He became a member of the Minnesota Supreme Court. And eventually he was the chief judge of the Minnesota Supreme Court. But as Don lays out in our book so very well in the connective tissue, for me, it wasn't until May 16, 2010, when a Black alumna, then known as Katie Washington, reached the podium and gave the valedictorian address at the University of Notre Dame, becoming the first Black valedictorian at our beloved university. And after that, Dan, I said, well, we're going to have to write this up, this history of Black students at the University of Notre Dame. But I didn't get a chance to do much about it because I knew I couldn't do it by myself. My editorial skills were limited to writing legal sort of documents or editing them, I should say. I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And the fast forward to my mentor, Don Wycliff, Pam and Don are coming out to the Bay Area. And Gina and I, my wife and I, decided to take them out for dinner and all that sort of thing. And the very next day, and this was in 2013, and Don even has the original email that I sent to him. I wrote to Don and said, Don, can we write the history of Black students at Notre Dame? And he wrote back within an hour. He said, yes, I think that's a good idea, as long as you help me. That's the genesis of the book, Dan.
Gotcha. And so Don, so 74 stories in the book. Is that right? 74? And
Yeah.
70 of which were written by the subject, right? That it's very much self-autobiographical, right? So now, but was that a logistical difficulty, just kind of gathering all 70, Don?
Yes, it was. To be truthful, there are not quite 70 self-written essays. There are about 5 or 6 that I wrote, people who are deceased, but most of them were written by the individuals themselves. We made that decision early on because neither of us was in position to actually do an actual history. And the timing wouldn't have been right either. This project we managed in about 6 months. Yeah, I lost my train of thought there. 74 years old, I'm getting that way.
It's the first book of its kind, right? And it tells the story of many firsts, right? From Frazier, Thompson, right?
Sure.
And
Sure.
now, I think there somewhere in the notes it says that there were 200 plus.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Submissions. So
yeah, we went to the Black Alumni of Notre Dame has a Facebook page, and we got them to post on it an invitation to nominate people whom members of the group thought ought to be in a book of this sort. And we ended up with 250 nominees and started winnowing and got, there were people who declined to participate. There were people, a few. There were most were eager to do so when we invited them. And then you get down to the end and some people have said, I will, and they don't deliver, or, so we ended up having to back and fill and find new folks and whatnot else, but we finally got the number we needed. And the idea was that the initial publication date, 2014, was going to be exactly 70 years after the entrance of Frazier Thompson, the first Black student. So the 70 was kind of the magic number.
Gotcha. Well, so you've got a whole bunch of potential writers, and there's new alumni every year. So will there be more editions of Black Elmas?
Not by this kid.
Well,
It's,
I asked Don, and that was his response then. So then what I did, I immediately thought, let's do a documentary film. Let's see if we can actually talk about the history of Black domers at the university. And I thought the documentary film would feature certain outstanding alums like, let's see, Nicole Hannah Jones. I always get the names mixed up. Of course, with the 1619 project, I thought that would be an example of dynamic Black leadership. I put that on hold for a number of reasons, but I may return to that idea.
I think that'd be a terrific project for you to tackle, and I'm sure would get a lot of viewers, so and a lot of interest. So let's fast forward to today. America, has made strides towards racial equality, but we still have a long way to go. And so I'll leave it to you two. I'd love to hear, your, both of your opinions on this one. Where do you think we as a nation or as a university, where could we still improve?
David?
Well, let me just start off, Don, and you have a lot of good thoughts on this. We want to keep this secular, I know, Don, and not religious, but there's a term I think a number of us would appreciate. I think the first thing we all have to do is make a basic examination of conscience. We have to decide, what do we have to do to make changes in the area of accomplishing an anti-racist society and to eliminate systemic racism in our midst? We make that determination. What do we have to do in our home? What do we have to do in our work life? What do we have to do at the grocery store? What do we have to do at the polling places? What basic changes do we have to make? When we hear somebody using inappropriate racial epithets, how do we react? Or do we just say, oh, I'm not going to worry about that at this point? Do we speak up? So once that examination of conscience is made, and by the way, it's beyond what I just mentioned, we have to examine what we, with all the talents that have been God-given, what can we individually and collectively do to change our university, our country, and our world? And we often, Dan, do not have to reinvent the wheel. We have people who have devoted 45 years of their lives for the Holy Family Institute, right there in Pittsburgh. Yeah. One of your wonderful guests in the past, Sister Linda Yankowski. Yep. Send her a check. Now, as a judge, I'm not allowed to fundraise, but you get what I mean, right? But you don't have to just give money. You can give your talents, you can volunteer. If you're a member of a company, they have interns that they'll give you. And your company would help pay for the interns to work in your company. There are so many things we can do. Modest Don here, he's now the new president of 100 Black Men, for example. Pam and he are court-appointed special representatives. They represent children in juvenile court, unlike their attorney, unlike their social workers. They come, a baseball term, to bat for these children who need assistance in our court system. I can go on and on about the Wycliffs. Don and his brother have endowed a scholarship for a needy student at the University of Notre Dame. Pam Wycliff is very involved in her local community with housing security issues, with Habitat for Humanity. So we have to, in this examination, examine what do we have to offer and offer it. We can't do everything, but we can do something, and we cannot refuse to do something that we could do. That's my answer.
I paid him to say all that. No, I'm sure there's a lot still to be done. I know there is. There's no question about it. I think what David said, I'm a big believer in well, I had it here a little while ago. I'm a big believer in religion and the notion of mindfulness, more living a considered life. And I think that's one of the things that I took away from Notre Dame, that if you don't live a considered life, you might as well not live.
Right.
And if we can cultivate that more in our society, rather than, and do that thing, examine our consciences routinely and think about how we relate to other people. That's the beginning of everything, it seems to me. That's one of the reasons I believe so deeply in Notre Dame, because I think it has unique assets and a unique history and in this regard, and can really be helpful to the nation in conquering this particular problem. So that's all I can think of at this point. I can't make policy prescriptions, but those days are over.
Hey, Dan, if I can just follow up with Don, actually, I think he was going somewhere that I think we may want to hear about. Don, if you remember a couple of years ago, we, a group of about 16 faculty members at Notre Dame, alumnus, approached the president of the university before George Floyd, before Breonna Taylor, but after Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. During that period of time, we asked the university to conduct a national discourse on race relations in America. You remember that well, don't you?
I do.
And you wrote a brilliant position paper and used a passage from the Gospel of Matthew. Do you remember that passage and what you said we all have to do, or many of us have to do? Do you remember that?
Yeah, it's I can't remember the verbatim, but it's that passage wherein Jesus says, if you're going to the altar to offer your gift and you remember that that your brother has some problem with you, that he has something against you, go first and be reconciled with him, and then come back and offer your gift. And I've always been struck by the fact that he didn't say, you remember you've got something against your brother. It's your brother has something against you. We don't think of it that way that often. And that's typical Jesus. He always had a different take on things.
That's great. So I think there's a point of contention between the two of you, actually. So Don, you've had much more success than David in recruiting family members to Notre Dame. So is that a little source of pride between the two, between the two of you, to have more family go through ND?
I don't I wish I could take credit for it, but no, I have, let's see, there are 6 Wycliff family people who have now gone to Notre Dame. 5 of us graduated. The last one being my son Grant, who graduated in 2010, the same class as Katie Washington Cole, in fact. So yeah, that's all.
Hey, Dan, that's a sore spot. I'm going to move on, okay?
Okay. All right. Well, I just love both of your stories in the book, Black Domers. And I'm just going to recite a couple, 2 lines. The last line from both of your passages. Don, yours is, "Our Wycliffe hearts truly do love thee, Notre Dame," and that was in the context of all of the Wycliffes that went through there. And David, I found this especially touching to me. It's my family and friends describe me as I am, a Notre Damer. There is no antidote for my condition in life. I am a Black Domer. And I just, that really struck me. There really is no antidote for my condition in life as being a Notre Damer. And I think, everybody here on the call and our viewers will agree. So But I want to thank both of you for this talk today. We're going to do something a little different for this season. I have a speed round of questions for the two of you. And everyone, please type in your questions into the Q&A box. Lily Crawford will be monitoring the questions, and we'll have Q&A from the audience right after our speed round. So for both of you, what is your favorite place on campus?
Ooh. Boy, that's a tough question.
What's the first place that comes to mind that really brings back great memories for you?
I'll be frank. I think it's that crossroads, that intersection down between the Grotto, St. Mary's Lake, Columba Hall, and there's a spot there, and you can see all three of those things, and that it feels like the very middle of the campus, and I like that.
Yeah. David?
And I have a couple of favorites. I like to show my grandchildren and my children and friends Farley Hall. I said that's where I met Don Wycliff and others. But I also like to go to the Grotto. I also like to go to Legends restaurant. And yeah, there's some of my favorites right there. Oh, I like to go to South Quad and point out to my grandchildren, oh, that's where I called the student strike. I like to do that too.
Great, great. So what's a memorable book that you've read? David?
Tribe by, what's his name, Sebastian Junger. I highly recommend it to everybody. Tribe. It has so much meaning for what we're doing right now. And I highly recommend that book.
Don?
Probably the single most influential book in my life. Two of them, actually. The Fall by Albert Camus, and Invisible Man by Ralph Ellis.
All right. Don, what do you consider your greatest accomplishment?
Raising two sons of whom I'm extremely proud. Most satisfying thing I have done in this entire life.
David?
Being a father and a grandfather.
Excellent. All right, David, what's your favorite ice cream flavor?
I want to say I don't have any, but if I would have a custard, I guess, a frozen custard.
Don?
Vanilla.
All right. Don, what is your favorite musical artist?
Ooh, I guess I'd say Nina Simone.
Excellent. Wow. David?
You stole that. I like Nina Simone. I remember going to south side of Chicago, Don, several times to see Nina. But I also like Al Green. I love the Commodores. I really like the Stylistics.
All right, David, if you could have dinner with three people, who would they be?
Phyllis Wheatley, the poet. Don Wycliff, the journalist.
Jeez.
And let's see, my wife Gina, I guess. I should start with wife Gina and go down.
Yeah, really? Don?
Three people. Well, I'd go first for Pope Francis. That'd be a hard one. Pope Francis.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say David. That'd be kind of a little weird, since. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I want to thank David Krashna, Don Wycliff. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go to Q&A right now. For everybody that's not sticking around for Q&A, the book is Black Domers, and all proceeds from the purchase of this book are going to the Frazier L. Thompson Scholarship Fund. So we're going to go to the questions now, and we have a hello from Eugene Hammond. Hi, it's Gene Hammond. I haven't seen you for 50 years, except maybe once, and I think of you all the time. That's
Don.
That's
Oh,
for
hi, Gene.
let's see here.
I didn't know you were in Pittsburgh.
Well, no, actually, he's wherever he is.
That's right. We're in a different era now.
That's right. Ricky Waters, is Between the Buns considered on campus? My kids loved it too. Second to the Grotto. I don't know what that is, but maybe you guys know what that is. Gene Collier says, thank you for continuing to keep the book and your narratives in front of all alumni. Your experiences are still relevant and meaningful today. So for the rest of the audience that is still here, please use the Q&A button to enter your questions, and we will ask them to our lovely panelists. So what in 2020 with COVID, how has it been for both of you? You know, has it been tough with the quarantine?
Well, I certainly would like to do more, Dan, outside, but I'm keeping quite busy with being an assigned judge. I'm on a task force from the California Judges Association called the Task Force for the Elimination of Bias and Inequality in Our Judicial System. And is that a mouthful or what? Anyway, we have a very dynamic group. We're trying to do something about the elimination of bias and inequality in our judicial system. And I also teach at Berkeley School of Law, and I'm real excited about that. And I'm thinking that maybe a couple of my former law students are on board. I won't ask you for any names, but I asked maybe a student from Turkey and one from Australia might be joining us at odd hours in their times. But that's what's keeping me busy. Don, what's keeping you busy? You're the new president of the 100 Men, Black Men, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. I have tried to avoid such positions in my life, but it finally caught up with me. So I'm spending a lot of time attending meetings and trying to figure things out, and herding cats is basically what it comes down to. I'm going tomorrow to get my second COVID shot. Excellent. After which I hope I will be able to travel and see my sons, whom I haven't seen in more than a year, and my daughter-in-law, who my younger son Grant and his girlfriend got married in January last year, and they have been locked together in their small apartment in Brooklyn ever since, thanks to COVID. And so I'd like to see them and see my other son in Houston.
We have a question from the audience. Kim says, thank you so much for sharing with us. What would be the one piece of advice you could give elementary school children these days? David.
Just be the best person you can. Let me tell you, I'm developing this idea of a pipeline between elementary schools and the University of Notre Dame. And I want to indoctrinate elementary students that early. Just like I was indoctrinated at the orphanage, I want to indoctrinate young students to go to the University of Notre Dame. And we actually have a program we're developing out here in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay area along those lines. But just be the very best person you can be.
Excellent. Got to get them early. Don?
Got to get them early.
I guess mine is about the same thing. I'd say learn to be a person of grace. And you can reflect on what that means, but I don't know, that's what I'd say.
Excellent. Well, let's see. Pat, he says, did the program on race you called for come to fruition? And is there another opportunity to continue that conversation on campus and or among alumni going forward? And thank you for both of you.
Pat asked that question, Dan. Pat,
Pat asked the question.
in
Is
answer to
there-
your question, okay.
Yeah.
Pat, we came that close to the president saying yes. We thought that the president was going to say yes. He finally declined for reasons that he gave. Is there a chance? I think this is a prime time to do it. And I think such activities like the Clue Center anti-racist vocabulary is one way to do it. And once again, Don Wycliff has been the sponsor of that program. So things are happening on campus and I'm optimistic.
Don?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
Just since you're involved with the Clue Center, the Cloud Center,
Mhm.
could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, one of the more interesting things that they're doing, you had asked about, is there going to be another edition of Black Domers? If there is to be, actually there won't be, but there's something like that going on at the Cloud Center with a program that they've created called With Voices True. And these are oral history interviews with members of the Notre Dame community, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everybody, faculty, student, alums, anybody connected with the university. They are collecting oral histories of their experiences with race, whether on campus or off, and having students do them, in fact, and collecting them into an archive, which will be available, at the library. The library is everywhere now, but and so that's one of the hopeful things. I was glad that they clued me in on that early on.
Great. Excellent. And so thank you so much to you two, David Krashna, Don Wycliff. Thank you so much for being here this evening. What a real pleasure to have you on with us. The book again is Black Domers, and all proceeds going to the Frazier L. Thompson Scholarship Fund. So thank you to the two of you. Thank you to the audience for joining us this evening. This has been another episode of Racial and Social Justice Beyond the Dome. Technical direction by Lily Crawford. I'm Dan Yu, and this has been a production of the Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh. Follow us at ND Pit Club on Facebook, Twitter, ndpitclub.com, and Notre Dame Pit Club on Instagram. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, and go Irish.